On November 20, 1947, the wedding of Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth II, and Philip Mountbatten took place. This event became a symbol of hope and awakening after the hard war years, and girls from all over the UK tried to help the young bride sew the wedding dress of her dreams. Let's take a closer look at this legendary dress. Norman Hartnell, who had been the royal family's official couturier since 1938, was chosen to design the wedding gown. In his autobiography, he wrote, "I went around the London museums, inspired by classical paintings, and fortunately found what I needed: a girl from a Botticelli painting in ivory silk flowing along her body, studded with jasmine flowers, asparagus, and tiny white rosebuds. I thought that all this flora on a modern dress could be recreated with crystal beads and pearls." Here, Hartnell is already working on Elizabeth II's coronation dress. Hartnell rolled up his elegant sleeves and rushed to the world of painting for inspiration, for there was no time to wait for the muse to come. The inspiration came from Botticelli's Spring. The floral bouquets on Flora's dress and the overall impression of Botticelli's painting Spring particularly impressed Hartnell. These elements conveyed an atmosphere of love, spring, and the rebirth of nature, exactly the moments that were ideal for symbolically expressing not only the formation of a new family, but also the rebuilding of the country after the difficult war years. 3 months before Princess Elizabeth's wedding, Hartnell submitted several sketches, from which the design of an ivory-colored dress with embroidered garlands of flowers was chosen. The bride approved this option, and preparations for the unique gown were set in motion. When the British learned of the upcoming royal wedding, girls from all over the country began sending their food stamps to the princess so that she could buy fabric for her wedding dress. After all, in those years of austerity, fabric could only be bought with coupons, and no exceptions were made even for princesses. Elizabeth was touched, but all the coupons had to be mailed back. It was illegal to use them. Instead, the British government gave its future queen 200 additional coupons. Queen Elizabeth insisted that her daughter's wedding dress be made of Duchess satin, a special kind of satin with a tight weave and a pearlescent sheen. The task of shipping this material was not easy in those years. However, efforts were made to provide the princess with what she desired. The satin was produced in a silk mill in Scotland. It was noticeable that the silkworms were purchased from China rather than from Japan or Italy, with whom Britain was at war during the Second World War. Some 10,000 pearls were ordered from America for the embroidery, which, as was usual for Hartnell, was to play the principal violin in the whole wedding ensemble. The richly embroidered white satin gown shimmered with every movement. The pearl and rhinestone embroidery was in the form of bouquets of fleur d'orange, jasmine, and white York rose. There was also wheat, a symbol of fertility. With every movement of the bride, the sequins on the dress shimmered, so that she literally shimmered. From the shoulders descended almost 4-meter trail of silk tulle, also covered with embroidery. A long veil and satin sandals with silver buckles decorated with pearls completed the outfit. Attached to the shoulders of the dress was a 13-foot plume of silk tulle embroidered with stars, flowers, and ears. The outfit was complemented by shoes made of the same Duchess satin fabric. Over the course of 7 weeks, 350 women labored to create the wedding gown for the young princess. Norman Hartnell would later describe the gown as the most magnificent dress I have ever made. You can read about it in the book, The Queen's Dress by Jennifer Robson, whose fictional character Anne is one of Hartnell's embroiderers. And real-life embroiderer Betty Foster confirms one scene in the book, in which Norman Hartnell, upon completion of his work, called all of his female employees to each do a small stitch on the princess's dress, just so they could say they were working on a wedding dress. All this time, the craftswoman labored in strict secrecy. Interest in the design of the dress was unprecedented. The same Betty Foster said that Americans rented an apartment across the street to try to see the dress. Hartnell staff signed a non-disclosure agreement, and the windows in the studio were painted over with white paint and covered with thick muslin. Naturally, everyone was dying of curiosity. All that one of the reporters saw was a huge box being taken out of the atelier the day before the wedding to be sent to the palace. And what did the bridesmaids look like? Their outfits are a perfect example of how skill can be used to create something truly magical out of modest materials. These dresses were made of simple white tulle, which was sold without cards, but it was embroidered with stars. The shoulders were covered with the same tulle, trimmed at the edges with white beaded flowers, and large satin bows were attached at the necklines. The hair was adorned with small wreaths made of white satin lilies and pinkish star flowers of the stonecrop, complemented by silver lame trim. The wedding dress was delivered to the palace the day before the ceremony in a 4-foot-long box. The princess never tried it on until that day, following a tradition that considered it a bad omen. The dress fit perfectly and didn't let me down, unlike the tiara, but that's another story. But to be fair, it should be noted that the dress looked more spectacular on the sketches. Firstly, because the petticoat looked more voluminous. However, in practice, the heavy fabric and rich embroidery created a weight pulling the dress down. And there was no time to add an underskirt, as in the case of the coronation dress. But the princess was still very satisfied. It was not for nothing that a few years later, she wished her coronation dress to be similar in cut to her wedding dress. After the wedding, the dress was exhibited at St. James's Palace, then in major cities in the UK, and then put away in storage, making occasional appearances at exhibitions. 30 years after the wedding, a curator at the Museum of London noted that the choice of silk was flawed because the fabric had suffered significantly from being weighted down with tin salts, which aids the decomposition process. It was also noted that the weight of the embroidery was pulling down the petticoat, increasing the strain on the material. Princess Elizabeth's wedding dress is said to have influenced the dress of Grace Kelly, whose wedding to Prince Rainier I of Monaco took place in 1956. The similarity is noted in the choice of color, ivory, fabric, heavy silk, and skirt silhouette, belle. Kelly had a completely different top, a brighter accent on the waist, and no embroidery on the skirt. And the overall image gave a very different impression. And already Grace Kelly's dress has undoubtedly influenced Kate Middleton's wedding dress in 2011. This is the continuity through one dress.